Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Today, we've got Jim from My Legal Einstein here to talk about the world of AI and contract review, among other things. So, Jim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Chad.
Yeah, this is gonna be fun because the AI topic is something that one scares the heck out of people, but I
hmm
think by the time we're done here, people realize that it's not quite as scary as and hard to use as often people think about, even as it's gone through cycles over the years of popularity. So I guess out of the gate, could you tell everyone a little bit about your background, talk about My Legal Einstein, what you're doing, and so everybody gets an idea of what you're offering.
Sure, that sounds great, Chad. So let me give you a little bit about my background. So my background, first of all, I'm not an attorney. Okay, my background is actually not from the legal side. My background is actually from the AI side of things. So I actually started working on the AI for legal probably about 8 years ago, and a lot of things associated with streaming media, streaming video, and it was actually kind of still at the infancy of that. So we actually did a lot of great work in that space. And I think it was about 5 years ago, I actually started looking at interesting problems that really impact people using AI. And I actually started thinking about video and then started looking at images and then started looking at sound. And the last area I started looking at was text. And specifically, that's what kind of drove me to kind of the legal contract space, which is a fascinating way of applying AI to kind of really addressing large amounts of text that actually is negotiated between different parties and how AI actually helps people do that.
Okay, so you're attracted to the contract world as not being an attorney. Like, what? I mean, I'm just curious. Kind of, I know you mentioned video and other. Like, what did you leave? Like, what drew you to the contract piece of it? Besides the opportunity from AI, because most people would probably run from contracts if given the opportunity.
Well, AI for text is actually really interesting in the sense that when you see a lot of innovations for artificial intelligence in terms of how it's actually able to understand the meaning of words and then the meaning of sentences, when you see legal contracts, you see basically large amounts of text that is actually then circulated between different people. Each person actually has a stake in it and also some feedback associated with it. And what we try to model is basically trying to understand really the word in the context of a legal contract. And then when you're actually able to do that, you realize you actually have many attorneys worldwide who actually are reviewing long contracts. 100 pages, 200 pages long is actually not uncommon, where you spend a lot of cycles. And artificial intelligence is really geared towards basically being able to understand this documents to be actually helps you guide the attorney to getting to the right answers about things.
Got it. Okay, so AI, as I mentioned up front, especially in the legal world, oftentimes, lawyers look at it, or let's broaden it out to legal professionals look at it as
hmm
one, too far above their head. There's some fear that the equivalent of like robots are going to take lawyer jobs, and then there's been a lot of hype around AI that maybe doesn't always play out. And so I guess let's go super practical, because
hmm
what I want to understand when we're done here, at a minimum, is when I'm interested in contract review software. Lots of options out there,
hmm
and some of them also often will tout AI features. We can get back into that in a bit, but I'm a lawyer. I'm in house. I'm whatever size firm I'm at. I want contract review software that is more intelligent, that has this AI component. Walk me through what happens. So I sign up for your product.
hmm
Um, how much do I have to know about AI? How much do I have to understand and grasp how it works?
So yeah, great question. So let me just give a little bit of background. My background, I actually ended up managing the AI engineering for both Icertis as well as Aptus. So we actually came a lot from the CLM space, and when they were actually talking about introducing artificial intelligence, it's one of those things that people kind of lead towards after maybe a year or 2 years of implementation side.
Right.
So the one main objective behind introducing My Legal Einstein is to kind of turn that completely around, which basically means that you should be able to get value from My Legal Einstein within 5 to 10 minutes of actually being introduced to My Legal Einstein. So the things that we actually are able to do is once you actually register for the My Legal Einstein site, it automatically sends you an email, you authenticate the email, and then you can actually start processing a contract. Now, the immediate values associated with that is basically once you process a contract, you're actually able to navigate the contract based on the legal topics. So as an example, you might want to see all of the payment terms associated with the contract, or you actually want to do a deep dive on specifically the financial aspects of the contract and actually being able to drill down and find all of those hidden messages, hidden language within the contract that sometimes when you actually do text search, you actually end up missing. So that's kind of the key value behind being able to actually kind of deliver from, within the first hour of actually touching My Legal Einstein. And then the second order of things is basically once you actually see this third party contract, a lot of times you actually don't know what's in it, which basically means that the next step, the next logical step, is to actually compare that third party contract to your own contracts and to your playbooks and to other contracts you actually negotiated, all of which actually are facilitated through our interface. Right. So it's actually quite different from what's actually out there in the market for legal contract review.
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit. So
Mhm.
you're able to compare it against your existing contracts. So practically speaking, you've uploaded your contracts to My Legal Einstein, and whether they've been and whether you've gone through an analysis or not, they're kind of as like almost like a contractor clause library. Is that
Mhm.
fair?
Kind of a knowledge base. And that knowledge base often includes things like corporate playbooks, clause libraries, examples of what you've done in the past. And the key piece is that when you're actually looking at how an attorney actually reviews third-party contracts, they very rarely craft language from scratch, right? What they're actually looking for
Yeah.
is basically other language that it might fit in this space. So with My Legal Einstein, we're actually helping the attorney determine what language fits in that specific third-party contract. And you can actually compare it side by side, which is kind of key value proposition for this.
Right. And so clause library, you create your own clause library, or every time you review a contract in My Legal Einstein, you can pull out certain clauses and store those within the software.
Yes, you can. You can actually change the clause library as you need to, because every firm, whether it's a small legal firm, whether it's in-house attorney, they all have a kind of a certain repository of
Right.
language that they're most familiar with. And they actually,
Or
all
want
they
to
want,
use or require.
exactly what they use over and over again, whether it's already contained in your own contracts that you actually want to reuse when you're actually introducing into a third-party contract.
Got it. So I've uploaded a third-party contract or one of my own. I'm able to analyze it with what I want. Let's say I look at the pricing piece of it.
Mhm.
Um, or let's say something like choice of law clause. You look at it and you think, okay, I'm mostly okay, but I want to replace this clause with our own language. Um, can you work on the contract within My Legal Einstein, or is it just doing this review and then you have to extract it and plug in your language separate?
Actually, what we have is a way for you actually not only compare language, but also implement the red lines, and
Okay.
then also be able to collaborate on this contract as well as negotiate the contract to get to the final red lines that you actually would use to actually get an executed contract in place. So it's a full cycle.
Okay. So then, you know, you make some changes, you redline the choice of law clause, for example,
Mhm.
then I can then send it internally to my team to review and collaborate on first.
Well, once you actually start the collaboration process, we have these concept of alerts within our system. So
Okay.
once you actually start the collaboration, automatically sends the finance terms to the CFO team, sends all of the deliverables to the operations team. So all of them actually would automatically be proactively alerted. So you're actually eliminated from the work of actually having copy and paste certain contract terms into an email and then hopefully getting some response back by sending the emails and going back and forth. So we actually streamline a lot of that process.
So
One of
how,
the,
oh, go ahead.
so one of the things that actually makes us also different is basically our concept of what artificial intelligence should be. So there's actually tools out there that basically kind of pretend like artificial intelligence is a robo lawyer of some sort,
Mhm.
someone who actually tries to do effectively your own job. We don't really try to actually have that approach, right? Because we know that the artificial intelligence is never going to be perfect, right? It always it's tended to actually learn from the user's input, but out of the box, it's never going to be able to replace an attorney in terms of how they work on things. So instead, what we actually have is an approach that artificial intelligence actually augments how an attorney can actually review a contract. So it effectively kind of gives them effectively superhuman powers to actually understand and navigate a contract so they can be able to navigate correctly to where you need to implement your red lines.
Got it. And then you can also, you mentioned being able to negotiate it, so you can send it to opposing counsel or opposing parties as well.
Correct. So we can actually have a view of the exact same contract that's negotiated within my Legal Einstein. One view, which is actually collaboration piece, which sees everything associated with actually what's happening with the contract. But
Right.
another view would actually allows the opposing counsel to actually see the contract itself, but only see the elements that are actually presented to them.
Got it.
So you don't have the constant sending back and forth of red line Word documents. And then, the issue about red lines is nobody really seems to know what red lines actually have been approved and which ones have not been approved. So you end up reviewing the same types of information over and over again.
Got it. Oh, interesting. Okay. Um, so let's talk about pricing for a second.
Mhm.
Um, Having looked at lots of contract review software, I mean, it can be really expensive. Like and at times, I mean, depending upon even with like internal legal departments, at larger companies, it's just outside the budget for what it provides, like, from a cost perspective. So like how does your pricing work if people use My Legal Einstein?
Well, keep in mind, a major objective behind My Legal Einstein is to make AI accessible, right? So we actually make every attempt to make it as freely accessible for a month or so. Once you actually register, you get a free month license to actually go process contracts. And then if you want to subscribe, it's $100 a month, which is typically a pretty reasonable amount per each attorney, right? So again, the end objective when you're talking about is like anyone, whether you're actually a small legal firm, you're a small in-house counsel team, can actually use My Legal Einstein and you should use it productively pretty quickly. Okay. In addition to that, one of the things we actually are also introducing is the ability to actually understand multiple languages. Okay, so not only are you able to process English contracts, but we're actually going to be supporting French, German, Italian, Spanish languages, right? And be able to understand and be able to negotiate these things, even though a lot of times the language itself actually might be somewhat foreign to you,
Hmm.
but you actually have repositories of different types of contract language in different languages, and actually being able to actually negotiate across these languages.
Interesting. And that's on the roadmap here coming down at some.
Within the next month or so.
Nice. Very good. What kind of firms and companies are using My Legal Einstein at this point?
Well, right now the adoption is typically from in-house counsel companies, right? Small teams, maybe 3 to 6 in-house counsels that actually are using it. The small legal firms actually are also adopting it pretty heavily as well. And the reason why is very simple. You already have the template language within the legal firm. The legal firm has already built up a repository of these types of expertise in terms of contract negotiation. So it becomes a very valuable tool to actually make their daily work actually much more effective and much more efficient.
Nice. Very good. Um, Anything else about, what you're offering now or what's coming down the pipeline, that we should talk about today?
Well, a few things. I mean, this is a unique time because we're actually launching in a pandemic period, right? So we actually fully understand that there's a kind of a unique time for that reason. So one of the things we actually do want to do is be able to support those attorneys, especially the ones that actually came fresh out of law school, who actually want to donate their time to support kind of pro bono legal issues for nonprofits that are kind of right now we're kind of a unique situation. You actually are tight in terms of resources, but the need is huge, right? So we want to make sure we give back to the community by supporting these nonprofits as much as we can. So that's something we're actually also going to be announcing in the next couple of weeks or so.
Cool. So how would that work? Is that something that law firms that serve nonprofits that would be able to use it, or are you targeting like the nonprofits themselves, or both maybe?
Actually, it's both. We are pretty liberal in terms of how we're actually able to do it. We cover all the cloud expenses, all the computing and aspects. Our objective is to actually make the legal review process as efficient as possible, just to support the nonprofits and community out there.
Got it. Okay. And so, you brought up a good point. I want to make sure we touch on, because we're recording this, April 12th, 2021. So like kind of depending upon who you talk to, maybe coming out of the pandemic, maybe not, just depends. What's been your experience launching this new company during a pandemic? How's that been going?
I'll tell you, this is a period that no one has ever planned for. Definitely not in my lifetime, not in your lifetime as well. We kind of take every day as we go, right? But we have to kind of understand, even when we're actually launching a technology company, there's a much larger need here that we want to make sure that we can actually cover right out of the gate, right? So it's not just about technology. It's not just about efficiencies and revenue models. It's really just about supporting communities that really need support right now. So.
Cool. All right. Well, if folks want, we'll put all this information obviously in the comments and things, but what's the best way for folks to get a hold of you and to learn about My Legal Einstein?
So right now, I mean, the things that I would actually encourage people to do is just go register and try your own contracts, or try contracts that you might be finding on the internet or such things along those lines. I think the reality behind artificial intelligence is such a valuable buzzword, right? That you see it everywhere. And because of that, you see lots of vaporware solutions out there. You see lots of things that are kind of pretending like it's artificial intelligence when it's not. Yep. So we definitely encourage people to just basically try and kick the wheels of this, just try this technology and see how well it works against their own contracts. So kind of convince themselves that you can provide value immediately for them. And then, as you're always able to actually access My Legal Einstein through whatever channels through emails, etc.
Cool. Very good. Well, Jim, I really appreciate your time today. Thanks for talking about My Legal Einstein, and look forward to see where it goes.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Chad. Bye now.